Listen closely. We don't have much time. The situation is dawai. Every second counts, so pay attention and follow my instructions precisely.
I'm 82 years old, and I learned too late that work was not my life. It took me most of those years to understand something that now feels painfully simple. The job I gave everything to, it was never going to sit beside me at the end. I'm not telling you this because I need sympathy. At my age, you stop looking for that. I'm telling you because I don't have many years left, and there are things I should have said out loud a long time ago. The house is quiet now, too quiet. My wife passed 3 winters ago. The clock in the hallway sounds louder than it used to. When you're young, you don't notice clocks. When you're old, they're all you hear. I used to think the silence meant peace. Now I know it can also mean absence. I gave 47 years to the same company, started at 23, fresh suit, borrowed tie, hair thick and dark. I remember the smell of the office, paper, ink, coffee that had been sitting too long on the burner. It felt important. I felt important. Back then, work wasn't just a job. It was identity. It was proof that I was somebody. I grew up watching my father come home with dirt under his nails and worry in his eyes. He worked hard, but there was never enough. I promised myself I wouldn't live like that. I would build something stable, something solid. My family would never feel that kind of uncertainty. That promise sounded noble. It felt responsible. I met my wife, Alina, when I was 27. She had this steady way about her. Calm even when we married in a small church. I remember thinking as I stood there that I would give her a good life, a secure life. In my mind, that meant working harder than everyone else. The promotions came slowly at first. Assistant manager, then department head. Each new title felt like confirmation that I was doing the right thing. Our first child, Daniel, was born when I was 31. I held him in the hospital and felt something shift inside me, a weight and a wonder all at once. I told myself I would work even harder now. For him, that's how it starts. Not with greed, not with selfishness, with love, with fear, with the desire to provide. I began staying later at the office. At first, it was once or twice a week, then most nights. There was always something that needed finishing, a report, a call, a problem only I could solve. Alina would wait up for me in the early years. I'd come home at 9 or 10, and she'd be sitting on the couch with a book in her lap. Sometimes she was reading, sometimes she was just waiting. "How was your day?" she'd ask. "Busy," I'd say, and I believed that was enough of an answer. Our daughter, Marie, came 3 years after Daniel. 2 children, a mortgage, a career moving upward. On paper, it looked like a life coming together. I missed Daniel's first school play because of a client meeting. I remember the meeting clearly. Big conference table, shiny shoes, handshakes. I don't remember what the deal was about. I just remember feeling relieved it went well. When I got home, Alina said, "He looked for you in the audience." She didn't say it in an accusing way. That almost made it worse. I told myself there would be other plays. There usually were, and I missed more than I attended. The thing about absence is that it doesn't feel dramatic at the time. It feels temporary, reasonable. Necessary, I told myself this is just a busy season. Seasons turned into years. Saturdays became just a few hours at the office. Vacations became chances to check in on things. I'd sit by the hotel pool with a folder on my lap while my children splashed in the water. "Come in with us, Dad," Marie would say. In a minute, I'd answer. I meant it. I always meant it. But there was always one more page to read. At 45, I made senior executive, bigger office, bigger salary. My name on a door. I remember standing inside that office alone the first morning, running my hand over the desk. I felt like I had won something. Alina hugged me that evening. "I'm proud of you," she said. She was always kind that way. But by then, the children were teenagers. Daniel had grown taller than Alina. Marie had started closing her bedroom door more often. I told myself this was normal. Teenagers pull away. That's what they do. Maybe they do. But I wasn't giving them much reason to lean in. There was a night Daniel asked if I could help him with a school project. I had a presentation the next morning. I remember standing in his doorway, jacket still on, briefcase in my hand. "Not tonight, son. Big day tomorrow." He nodded. "It's okay." It was never okay. It was just accepted. That's the part that stays with me now. How easily they accepted my absence. How quickly they adjusted to not expecting me. You don't notice the shift while it's happening. You notice it years later when your phone doesn't ring as often as you thought it would. In my 50s, the company went through changes. New leadership, new pressures, younger men coming in, sharp and ambitious. I worked even harder to stay relevant, to prove I still mattered. I told myself I was protecting my family's future, but my children were already building their own. Daniel left for college. I drove him there. It was a long drive, just the 2 of us. I thought we'd talk the whole way. Instead, there were long stretches of silence. At one point, he said, "You always seemed busy, Dad." It wasn't said with anger, just observation. I laughed lightly. "That's how you keep things running." He nodded, looking out the window. I didn't ask what he meant beyond that. I didn't want to dig into something uncomfortable. I told myself there would be time later for deeper conversations. There's that phrase again, time later. Marie married in her late 20s. I gave a speech at her wedding. I talked about hard work and commitment, about building a stable life. People clapped. I sat down feeling satisfied, but when she hugged me afterward, she held on longer than usual, and she whispered, "I wish we'd had more dinners together." I smiled. I said, "We had plenty." But even as I said it, I tried to remember them. Specific dinners, specific conversations, they blurred together. Or maybe they were fewer than I wanted to admit. Alina and I grew older side by side, but not always face to face. We shared a bed, a house, responsibilities, but there were long stretches when we didn't share much else. She once said quietly, "When will it be enough?" I knew she meant the work. "Just a few more years," I told her. "Then I'll slow down." I believed that too. At 62, I finally retired. There was a luncheon, speeches, a plaque with my name engraved in gold. People shook my hand and said I'd be missed. For a few weeks, I felt strange waking up without somewhere to be. I wandered the house, rearranged the garage, started small projects I never finished. I thought retirement would feel like freedom. Instead, it felt like standing still after decades of running. Alina had her own routines by then, friends she met for coffee, volunteer work at the library, a life that did not revolve around waiting for me anymore. One afternoon, I suggested we take a trip, just the two of us. She smiled gently. "I'm tired," she said. "Maybe later." Later, she got sick not long after that. It wasn't sudden, but it was steady. Hospital visits, medication schedules, quiet afternoons. I sat beside her bed one evening while she slept. The machines made soft sounds. I held her hand and realized I didn't know the small details of her days anymore, the thoughts she carried, the things she worried about. I had been present in the house, but absent in the life. When she passed, the house changed in a way I can't fully describe. The air felt different, the rooms larger. I walked into my old study one morning and looked at the awards on the shelf. They didn't comfort me. They didn't speak. I tried calling Daniel that day. It went to voicemail. He called back later that evening. He lives in another state. He has his own children now, a busy life. I understand. Marie visits when she can. She sits at the kitchen table, the same one she once did homework on alone while I was at the office. We drink tea. We talk about simple things. She is kind to me, both of them are, but there is a distance that was built slowly, brick by brick over decades, not from cruelty, not from a single fight, just from accumulation. I used to think being remembered meant having your name on something solid, a building, a document, a long list of achievements. Now I think being remembered might be as simple as someone missing your voice at dinner. I don't say that lightly. I'm 82, and most of the people I worked with have moved on or passed on. The company still exists. My office has someone else's name on the door. The projects that once kept me up at night have been replaced 100 times over. The world did not stop when I left. I used to believe it might. What stayed, what still echoes, are smaller things. Sound of Marie asking me to come into the pool, Daniel standing in his doorway with a project in his hands, Alina waiting on the couch with a book she wasn't reading. I remember the last clear conversation I had with Alina. She was sitting in her chair by the window. The light came in softly that afternoon. It caught the gray in her hair. I had always thought I would notice when we grew old together. I hadn't noticed. It had just happened. She said, "You always carried the world on your shoulders." I almost corrected her. I almost said, "No, I carried us." But I didn't. Because sitting there, looking at her thin hands resting on the blanket, I understood something I hadn't before. She never asked me to carry the world. She only asked me to sit beside her in it. When you're young, you confuse providing with loving. You think the longer hours, the heavier responsibilities, the promotions and praise, those are proof of devotion. They are proof of effort, not always of love. After she passed, I went through boxes in the attic. Old drawings the children made. Birthday cards, photographs. In most of them, Alina is there. The children are there. Sometimes I am there too, but I look slightly apart. Suit still on. Phone clipped to my belt, half turned toward something else. There are entire stretches of their lives that I know only through pictures. Daniel's soccer games, Marie's music recitals, family barbecues where I arrived late, tie loosened, already tired. At the time, I thought exhaustion was a badge of honor. It meant I was necessary. Now I see it meant I was absent. The cost of that absence didn't arrive all at once. It arrived quietly. Daniel stopped asking if I could come to things. He would just say, "It's fine, Dad. I know you're busy." Marie stopped knocking on my study door as often. She would slip notes under it instead. Dinner conversations became shorter. Alina stopped waiting up some nights. None of it felt dramatic enough to alarm me. There were no slammed doors, no shouting matches, just adjustments. People adjust to the space you leave. In my late 50s, I remember receiving an award at a company banquet. It was a large ballroom. Applause filled the room. I gave a speech about dedication and teamwork. When I sat down, I looked toward our table. Alina clapped politely. The children were older by then, nearly adults. They smiled. But there was a look in Alina's eyes I couldn't name at the time. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride either, it was distance. After the event in the car, I asked, wasn't that something? She said, yes, it was something. I didn't ask her what she meant. I didn't want to spoil the feeling of achievement. Looking back, I think she was already grieving the life we didn't quite have. When I retired, I thought I would step back into my family like a man returning from a long trip. I expected warmth. I expected closeness to simply resume. But relationships don't pause while you're away. They continue. They change shape. Daniel had his own ways of solving problems. He didn't call me for advice much. When he did, our conversations were practical, brief. Marie was more open, but even with her, there were things I sensed she had learned not to bring to me. The deeper fears, the small daily details. I had trained them without meaning to see me as a provider, not as a presence. That realization came slowly, then all at once. One evening, about a year after Alina died, Daniel visited alone. We sat in the living room, the same room where he once did homework while I answered emails. He said, "Dad, can I be honest?" I told him yes. He took a breath and said, "I always respected how hard you worked, but I never really knew you." It was not said cruelly. He wasn't trying to wound me. He was telling the truth. I nodded. I think I even said, "That's fair." But inside, something gave way. All those years, I thought I was building something solid for them. And yet the foundation between us was thinner than I believed. Work had given me structure, deadlines, clear expectations. If you perform well, you advance. If you put in more hours, you're rewarded. Family doesn't work that way. Presents cannot be stored up for later. You can't stockpile attention and distribute it when convenient. I thought I could. There was a particular afternoon that returns to me often now. Marie was about 8. She had drawn a picture of our house. The 4 of us stood in front of it. She had drawn me larger than the others. "Why am I so big?" I asked her. "Because you're important," she said. At the time, I felt proud. Now I wonder if she was trying to make me visible in a way I hadn't been. After Alina's funeral, people said kind things about me, about my dedication, my success, my reliability. No one mentioned my laugh or stories I used to tell at dinner. Because there weren't many. I'm not saying I was a cold man. I wasn't unloving. I hugged my children. I paid for their education. I showed up when it truly mattered, at least by my definition. But life is not made only of milestones. It's made of Tuesdays, of ordinary evenings, of small interruptions and shared boredom. Those are the moments I traded. When I walk through the house now, I sometimes sit at the kitchen table and imagine what it might have been like if I had come home earlier more often. If I had left the office while there was still light outside. Would Daniel have told me more about his fears? Would Marie have asked for my advice when her first relationship ended? Would Alina have looked less tired? I don't know. That's part of what makes regret so heavy. You don't get to run the experiment again. I used to believe I would be remembered at the company for decades, that my name would carry weight. Last year, I attended a small retirement gathering for a former colleague. Most of the people there were young enough to be my grandchildren. They didn't know who I was. I introduced myself, and one of them said politely, "Oh, you must have been there a long time ago." A long time ago, that's what my career is now. A long time ago. But when Marie calls and says, "Dad, I made your soup recipe," I feel something warmer than any award ever gave me. When Daniel asks me how I handled a difficult conversation at work, I answer carefully, not because I want to sound wise, but because I want him to hear more of me than he did before. I can't undo the missed games. I can't go back to the poolside and put down the folder. Time doesn't refund you. If I'm honest, there are nights I lie awake and think about all the evenings Alina spent alone in the living room. The sound of the television filling space where conversation might have been. She never demanded more from me. That almost makes it harder. She trusted that I was doing what I thought was right. And I was. That's the complicated part. I wasn't chasing pleasure. I wasn't neglecting them for something trivial. I believed I was protecting them from hardship. But protection without presence feels hollow over time. Now at 82, my days are slow. I wake early. I make coffee. I sit by the same window where Alina once sat. The company newsletter still arrives sometimes. I flip through it. New faces, new initiatives. The language has changed. The building has been renovated. There is no trace of me there. But in a drawer in the kitchen, there is a crayon drawing of a house with 4 figures in front of it. I keep it there because it reminds me of what was real. If you're listening to me and you're younger, I'm not going to tell you to quit your job. I'm not going to pretend work doesn't matter. It does. Providing matters. Responsibility matters. But I wish I had understood that work will always ask for more. It has no natural stopping point. There is always another level, another target. Another crisis that feels urgent. Your children stop asking eventually. Your spouse stops waiting up, not out of anger, out of adaptation. And when you finally have the time you once postponed everything for, you may find that the shape of your life has already been decided. I used to measure my days by productivity. Now I measure them by phone calls, by visits, by whether someone sits across from me at dinner. I am grateful for what I built. I won't deny that. My family was comfortable. They were educated. They never worried about bills the way my parents did. But comfort is not the same as closeness. If this story means anything to you, maybe just let it sit for a while. I don't need you to agree with me. I don't need you to change anything overnight. Just notice who is waiting in your living room. Notice who is asking you to come into the pool. I thought I had endless tomorrows to be more present. I was wrong. At 82, I don't have many tomorrows left. I spend them differently now. I answer the phone when it rings. I linger in conversations. I say more than busy when someone asks about my day. It doesn't fix the past, but it makes the present a little less empty. When my time comes, and I know it isn't far, I don't think I'll be thinking about the office. I think I'll be picturing a small house drawn in crayon, a couch with a woman waiting patiently, a little girl in a pool calling out to her father. I just wish I had stepped in sooner.